filming live in front of a studio audience. You are our studio audience. We're taping this in case if you know of anyone who might have missed this presentation. We're live casting it on YouTube and we'll be taping it, so anyone who's missed it will be able to get all of this information both on our website, YouTube, and we'll also have this whole presentation available as well. I've got a couple things up here. I've got some index cards and some pens that I'm just going to leave at the back here. At any time, if you've got a question that we haven't been able to answer, we run out of time, or maybe you're just shy, write down your question on the index card and we'll get back to you with an answer either in the next newsletter, or write down your email address and we'll be sure to email you an answer to whatever question you have. So I'm just going to leave these right at the back here. And if you have any questions, come on back, grab an index card. The next thing, we also have about 8 or 9 school profiles. I'm just going to put them at the back there, first come, first served. We have more copies of these.
We can print more copies.
We can print more copies of these. We have more copies of these somewhere, but it's our school profile for this year. I'll just put those on the back table as well. So the purpose of our meeting today is for mostly grade 10 parents. If you're a parent of a grade 10 student, please raise your hand. All right, good, good. If you're a parent of not a grade 10 student, but somebody else in grade 9 or 11 or middle school. All right, okay. So we've got a few over there. Hi, how you doing? But this is our presentation. We do this every year. We get our IB teachers here. We talk about the IB program. We talk about any changes that are going through with the IB program. We introduce our IB teachers. You get a chance to ask them any questions, anything like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 avenues that we have towards graduation. Students here can choose to take 3 different tracks. They can choose to take the AISL diploma, which gets them an American high school diploma that's good anywhere at any of the accrediting agencies, in the United States, Canada, Australia. It's recognized all over the world. That being said, a lot of our students choose to take certificate courses. And because we only offer IB Math at grade 11 and 12, all students choose to take an IB Math course. We also only offer IB Economics and Social Studies, or Economics and History, okay, for social studies, so all of our students take one of those as well. They might take the course and then choose not to take the exam, that's fine. They would get AISL credit, but then not an IB credit. Okay, so they can do that as well. Or they could take the IB exam and get a certificate for that credit as well. All right. The third option is they can go full IB. That's 6 IB courses for over 2 years, plus something called EE, which is extended essay, something called TOK, which is theory of knowledge, and something called CAS, which is community activity and activity or action? Activity and service. I get activity and action mixed up. CAS, which is basically our service learning program. Community service, essentially. So there'll be a guide to this, by the way, printed in the newsletter, and this will be printed in the newsletter, so when you get this slide, you'll be able to click on here and pick up a copy of the high school course guide, which talks about all of the courses that we offer in much greater detail, all the prerequisites, and anything else that you'll need. So all of that will be available there. Our AISL diploma is a 4-year course of study, requires 26 credits. It used to be only 24. We wanted to make it more rigorous. We wanted to have students take fewer study halls. Instead of like 1 or 2 study halls a day, now very few of our students take study halls, except for those that are doing full IB. Some of them take 1 or 2 study halls, and they need it because they have to study really hard. We've introduced courses like the Global Online Academy and other things like that for students in grade 9 and 10, so they can take all sorts of exciting courses that they might not have to for the study halls anyway. So that's exciting. They have to take a lot of different credits. They have to take 4 math, 4 English, 3 science, 3 social studies. We'll go through that in a bit later. 2 PE credits, 1 arts, all of those things they should be completed by grade 10. Mr. Dworak, our high school counselor, makes sure that all of our students are on track for their credit. So by the time they get to the end of grade 10, they can move right into the IB program without worrying about all those sorts of things. We'll also talk about the CAS program and service learning program. One of the things we're trying to change, and I'm not sure we'll be able to change for next year, is that we're trying to do away with the 75 hours of community service that they're required to do. And we're trying to get away from just saying you have to do this many hours, but instead we're trying to get them to do a certain number of projects. It's always going to be over 75 hours anyway, but counting hours is sort of like, it makes it a chore, it makes it tedious. And if we're getting our students to do and be excited about community service, we don't want it to feel tedious. So that's something that's on the books right now, but it could be changing. Let's see. I'm going to turn this over right now to our new high school counselor. I'm sure you've all met him, Mr. Doug Dworak.
Hi guys, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here. We got a lot to get through, so we'll just barrel through. Like Mr. Schultz said, the expectation of all AISL students is no matter what you do, if you have been with us for 4 years, you earn an American high school diploma, which is different than the IB diploma that we're here to talk about. An American high school diploma plus the exam that is called the SAT, so your grades in class, your course grades from 9th grade through 12th grade, right? 9th through 12, those courses, those grades, plus the exam named the SAT, allows you access to universities across the world. So if your student chooses to do certificates or to do just the American diploma, they're still going to get to university. So let's put that out there right now. They'll still get to university with an American diploma now. This is how they do that. And these are also what you need for most North American universities. So if you're applying to the University of California system, they will expect that you have 4 years of high school English, 3 years of laboratory sciences minimum, 3 years of mathematics minimum. We do 4, so your students are already over-prepared, well-prepared. Health and PE, common across the world, and then electives, right? So this is again different than opting to do something further and beyond, which is the International Baccalaureate. So that begs the question: why bother? What's all? We've seen the 12th graders stressing out and studying until forever and complaining. So why would you put a student through all of that rigmarole when I just told you that they can get to uni without that, right? So part of this is we have a good part of our community that you just know. We are from the UK, we're here for work, our family intends to return to the UK upon completion of secondary school. If this is your situation, if this is your family, if you intend to go to the United Kingdom or a country that was formerly part of the Commonwealth, I would encourage you to take the full IB diploma. The majority of UK universities will have the status quo expectation that if you're at a diploma program school, you are doing the full IBDB. So that includes places like Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa, depending. It's a little trickier there. Now for the US and Canada, it's a bit messier. For those of you who've been in my other talks, sorry, mind if I get a straight shot there? Thank you. For those of you who've been in my other talks, you know that I say it depends to most questions. That answer remains the same, especially for the United States. It depends. There's 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States of America. It's not a one-size-fits-all program. So for highly selective universities in the US, which I think are those name brands most of us are familiar with, then you want your student to take the most rigorous program of study available. So the most rigorous program of study available at our school is the diploma program. Doesn't get tougher, doesn't get more demanding than that. That is the gold standard for academics here at AISL and across the world. And then if you're not sure, say, well, we might do Canada, we might do the US, we might do the UK, we might apply to all three. If that suits you, if that's your family, if that's your students in the room, if that is you, start with the full program. Start with the full diploma. Some sports, some activities, some endeavors, it's cut and dry. Either you clear the bar or you do not. So either you've made the grade, you've made the cut, or you have not. So it's sort of like the high jump here, right? There's no like maybe. Either you made it or you didn't. So for places like the UK and former Commonwealth countries, that's how we're looking at this, right? Did you make the proper grades? Are you a good test taker? Can you sit down and be confident that you will perform on that exam, like the IB? So this, if your student is the type that can sit down, pound out a test, do great, full diploma in a place like the UK or Commonwealth countries makes sense. For illustration, United States admissions is much more similar to figure skating. Just because you can get out on the ice and go forwards and backwards does not guarantee you anything. So I like to always put this out there as we're sort of discussing next steps, because we will return to it. And I'm just going to leave it there for now. Something else to consider, though you cannot see this, I bring it up every time I talk to parents. For US admissions, the most important factor after your grades and SATs, most important factor for US admissions after the grades you earn in your classes, third thing on the list, strength of curriculum, which goes back to the original comment. If you had the choice between taking a challenging option and a less challenging option, did you challenge yourself? Not all A's are made equal, unfortunately. I do have to say that. Right? Not all grades are completely equal. So taking the most challenging course of study and earning high grades, key phrase there, and earning high grades will help assist you to gain access to the universities that you're aiming for. We used to run a program called Naviance. Naviance no longer works with international schools anywhere, so we have scrapped them. And we've replaced it with a program called Bridge U. What you need to know about Bridge U is this is a way that we work with our students to sort of expand awareness for career and university. In grades 11 and 12, we really use it more robustly for students to create their university research. So this is just sort of an FYI for now. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anton Pav, who will outline the details of the IBDP. Yeah, this is the one that absolutely.
Good afternoon. Thank you for making it through the weather and all the other obstacles to be here. Mr. Dworak has been talking about the benefits of the IB program, some of the university considerations you may have, and what happens when you achieve the diploma. I want to talk about what it is that in the 2 years between when you enter it and then you get to the end, you experience, what to expect going into and choosing the best program of study, and then during the program. And so just go through some of the details of the IB program itself. And I see some parents here who have children who have already gone through and survived the DP, some who are currently in it and are surviving, so I think there are some resources here that could be tapped into. If you talk to some of the people here, you see that it's manageable. Students are groaning now as we go into the really challenging part of the program, but it's manageable. Just some overall statistics. The IB is really growing. It has been established in 1968. It's been growing dramatically since 2014. It's grown 18%, expanding a great deal in China and in India. The United States as well is the third largest growth. It's currently in 143 countries. Last year, just so you know, all of the seniors who were testing, all the seniors who were all the seniors who were testing at our school, the 16 seniors, were competing against 163,173 other students who were seniors in the diploma program. And this is how they're measured. It's really an international standard. Happy to say at AISL you do see we have very high levels of participation. Last year 100% of our seniors were involved in the diploma program. And we have fairly high results, very respectable high average level. The global average for those 163,173 was an average of 29.8 total points out of the 45 available. Our school had an average of 32.8 points out of the 45, which is significantly higher. We have very respectable results, and it's a good cohort. Another thing I would mention about the 100% participation is that students kind of don't have a choice. With the math program we have, every student who's taking a math class is in an IB math class. So participation, I don't want you to be deceived that everybody's forced in to do the full diploma. Some students are taking only a smaller number of IB classes. Students who are thinking about the IB in a great deal will be thinking about what Mr. Dvorak spoke about, or into the idea of what the IB really cares about, the learner developing personal qualities and traits, independent thinking, active engagement. The IB markets itself and says we don't need the most intellectually brilliant, student who can crunch numbers and have insightful analysis. They market themselves and they say we welcome students who are highly motivated. That personal trait of active involvement and motivation is very important to them. So that's something that's really critical when students take responsibility for their own learning. Yes, access to some of the highest ranking universities around the world, and this comes because of two different ways that universities recognize the diploma program. Either through granting university credit, because it is a university level program that students are taking in junior and senior years. So they can grant credit, and we've had students getting up to 75% of a year's worth of credit when they go to university. It's a significant advantage in that way. Another way is through the admissions considerations. There are some universities look very favorably upon students who have survived the diploma program. It shows a certain kind of stamina and dedication and consistency in their learning, so that the IB trains students to have the resilience to then be successful in college, in addition to the academic knowledge that's provided. Furthermore, it's the International Baccalaureate program, and so the focus on identity and culture, who students are, and how they can relate respectfully to students and people of other cultures and nationalities is an important foundation of the program, and it's something that's very intentional in the diploma program. This is the image. I don't think you can see it very well, but the IB uses this to represent the diploma program. Fundamentally, the student is at the core, and then the academic subjects they take, the 6 academic subjects that make up the basis of the program, are further out in the wheel. I'll talk about this in more detail in further slides here. Overall, you know this, I think, already. It's a 2-year program of study, so students are sophomores right now. They're going to make the last course selection choices of their lives for high school. Sounds dramatic, right? They make their final course selections now, and then junior and senior year, they're in their IB classes and move through successfully. The way the program works is almost like university, where students are allowed to choose a major, choose a concentration or focus. They have 6 classes, 3 of them taken at standard level and 3 at higher level. Higher level courses, much greater depth of focus on their subject. They require 240 hours of instructional time, whereas the standard level classes are 150 hours worth of instructional time. So they're significantly different there, and students can choose higher level sciences if they're interested in going into engineering, higher level language or literature or economics to focus on those kind of subjects, or history, you know, so they choose a specific focus for themselves. And when they're in those 6 classes pursuing their academic studies, they're graded through external and internal assessment. And that simply means this. Internal assessment means they're graded by teachers that know them and work with them here at school. External means the IB has their own group of examiners outside of AIS that will grade students' work. I'm an English teacher in the IB here. 30% of the students' work is graded by me, by the teacher here at school. The other 70 is graded by teachers outside of our school. These teachers don't know who our students are, don't know what challenges they've encountered, don't know what talents they have. It's a worldwide standard that's graded very objectively, and that's where part of that international standard comes in, through that external assessment. In addition to those 6 academic classes, you have, as a student, to complete an extended essay. You have to complete some community service work called Creativity, Activity, and Service, and then also a 7th class, Theory of Knowledge class. And you'll hear more about all of those components in just a few minutes when other teachers come up to talk. But all of those are required components of the IB program, 6 of them academic classes, and then the others are additional work you have to do. You also have to be thinking that during the end of junior year, beginning of senior year, students are going to take that 8th class, which is university applications. They're going to be working very hard and focusing a lot of effort on that too. So as far as the balance of work, well, there isn't balance, there's just work. Funny, not funny. How is the IB scored? You've got your 6 academic classes. Each of those classes is awarded either 1 through 7 on a scale. So 7 possible points in each of 6 classes is 42 possible points. And then with Theory of Knowledge and the extended essay combined, there are 3 additional points available. So a total of 45 points is available in the IB diploma program. To earn an IB diploma, a student needs to get 24 points total, okay? Which 24 divided by 6 is 4. So an average of 4 points per class in general. There are some other smaller detailed rules that I can share with you. I know it's going to be kind of information overload, so I brought handbooks that have a lot of the details and information and links to websites in them here, and I'll hand these out when I get done talking so that I get a little attention for now. But you have to successfully complete CAS in addition to the other work, and that's something you'll hear about in just a second. As far as just who participates in the diploma program and how that's determined, really our driving philosophy is we want students to be challenged to the most rigorous educational program that's suited to them individually. We counsel, Mr. Dvorak, Mr. Scholl, myself, teachers, 10th grade teachers, everybody. We're going to talk to students and let them know where we think they're best placed in specific subjects. We can counsel, we can advise, we can recommend, but the final decision is based in the family's hands. What are you going to challenge yourself to accomplish? Okay? We can strongly advise against overburdening yourself with academic challenges if we really feel like there's a likelihood of failure. We don't want that. So we'll advise, but ultimately it's up to a student and his or her family to make the final decision, and that's an important aspect of the openness that we have for students to enter the program. Okay. At this point, I wanted to ask Mr. Heil and Mr. Mewborn to say a few things about theory of knowledge. and then we'll move on. And after this, Mrs. Freund will talk about the CAS program a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. I am Mr. Guart, and I'm one of the 2 Theory of Knowledge teachers that we have here at this school. Theory of Knowledge is a 1-year course done over 2 years. 11th grade students take 1 semester in the second half of the year. They begin the course in January. Over the summer, they'll do some other things, and then they come back in the fall for their 12th grade year, the first semester, where they will take many of the things that we've discussed from January to May and begin the process of developing the 2 assignments that TOK students have to do. Theory of Knowledge is essentially a class in which the students are asked to examine how they know, and how do they know what they know is true. And it asks them to be investigators in knowledge and knowledge sources and how knowledge can be applied. If you speak to many of the students who have taken the class, it's generally considered to be one of the more interesting and fun classes. There's a lot of discussions that take place. Today we were talking about did a student who was sitting in the classroom, does that person really exist? And it was a pretty good discussion. It is a course that the students must pass. They must pass it if they're going to get a IB diploma. Passing the course isn't terribly tough to do. The bar is not especially high. What is important for us is that the students do well enough so that there's a matrix of TOK grades and extended essay grades, and if the students do well enough on TOK, they can get a significant bonus towards the total number of points that they would need. There are a couple of very important assessments that the 12th grade students have to do, and Mr. Heil will talk to you about that.
Right, and also you notice that in the circle that was there, they put the student in the middle, and then they put TOK next to it, because the idea is that the student is the center of their learning universe, and as Mr. Murborn said, what we try to do is think about how are all different ways that you can know something, through sense perception, through memory, through language, and how do those all connect to all their classes? So the question is, how do they fit to the classes, and then how do the classes fit to each other? The 2 assessments, one is, as Dr. Puff said, an internal assessment. The students will do an oral presentation. They will take something out in the world called a real-life situation, and they will use it to examine the ways that they know that the person who's presenting it are telling the truth, and the idea of examining the nature of truth from that piece. That's the piece that Mr. Mubon and I look at, we grade, we send to the IB. They moderate it to make sure that we meet the international standards. The other part, in September, there are a series of essay titles that they get to choose from, and they have to write to those. And over the years between spring of junior year and fall of senior year, we work with them on how to do oral presentations, how to write essays, how to talk about the TOK language, so that they can have fun with the process and be successful with those pieces that go on. And as you say, talk to the seniors that are here, talk to the juniors, and they may have interesting discussions with you at the dinner table based on some things that have happened in the class. So that's a core piece, but a very interesting one.
Mrs. Freund, do you enjoy talking a little bit about CAS?
Mrs. Freund's going to be taking over a new position next year. Many of you know her as the Spanish teacher. She might have taught your kids Spanish or IB Spanish. She's no longer going to be teaching that next year. She will be the CAS coordinator for all of high school and middle school. It is part of our determined effort to increase our community service here at AISL, trying to get that outreach into the community, getting our students more and more involved. So her full-time position next year is going to be with that. We do have a new Spanish IB teacher that you'll be interested in meeting later on in a few minutes, but I'm going to turn that over to Carolina right now.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, so CAS, service learning is embedded into the CAS program and the CASL. So here at AISL, you'll hear two things, and maybe some of your children have already mentioned CASL. But I'm going to talk about CAS first, because CASL is just like a mini CAS. So CAS is part of that core, the IB core. And the unique thing about CAS is that it's not formally assessed. So it's not a course, and there's no points allotted to it. Essentially, the CAS program is a collection of experiences that are enjoyable and also challenging for the student. And they have to fall within the three strands, which is the C, the A, and the S. So the C is the creativity, and it's going through the creative process and producing a product or a performance. The A is activity, which is physical exertion leading to a healthy lifestyle. So think sweat, physical activity, or anything leading to or contributing to well-being and health would fall under activity. And then finally, service. So service is meeting an authentic need in the community. And so that makes up the CAS program. The CAS is required, completion of CAS is required to receive that IB diploma. So even though it's not formally assessed, at the end of the CAS program, I have to check whether the student has successfully completed CAS. If they don't, they could possibly not receive their IB diploma, even if they reach and pass all their exams. Okay, so it is a requirement. Now, how do you complete the CAS program then? So there's a few things that are part of the completion process. The first thing that IB wants to see is that the student has evidence of frequent and active engagement in CAS for 18 months. So that means that at the start of the school year, at the start of 11th grade, the CAS program begins, and it goes for 18 months. And that allows also some time for preparation for the exams and all that. So if a student is frequently and actively engaged in experiences that are creative, activity, and service, and are showing the evidence of that, then they will meet that requirement. In order to show evidence of that, they need to keep a portfolio. So while this is, again, not formally assessed, this is one of the things we use. The only way that I know that a student has actually completed CAS is by the evidence and reflection that they put in their portfolio about the experiences and the projects they have done. So that's their CAS portfolio, essentially. There's also 3 formal interviews that are recorded and that could possibly be selected by the IB and listened to, that are part of the program as well. And finally, 1 meaningful CAS project is required that has to be collaborative and follow the 5 stages of CAS. So those are basically the indicators and how we measure whether a student has successfully completed CAS or not. As many of you guys know, your children are very active. Most of your children are very active in school already. All of that is CAS. The challenge comes with documenting and evidencing and reflecting. That's where students struggle the most. And so that's one of the things that we have, or I have worked really hard this year so that we can provide more support in that for students that will, and we'll be able to do that next year, that I'll be doing that full-time. So that's the CAS program, essentially. And this is in addition to the rigorous IB courses, okay? Now the CASL program is simply a mirror of CAS, and while we are still working on formally creating the specifications of what the CASL program will entail and what's required for students, that's still in progress. The CASL will be for 9 and 10, in preparation for their 11th and 12th grade experience, and also for AISL only diploma students. So if your child decides not to take the full IB program, we still want to challenge them with CASL so that they have the opportunity to build these kind of real life skills, and also to show that they are working on these global competencies that as a school we have identified as what we want for our students when they graduate. So that's the role of the CASL. In addition, we have the requirement of the 75 service hours. So what I tell students is really what they do in CAS, especially in their projects, counts for the hours. But when they do hours, it may or may not count for CAS, because someone can just show up at an event, put in an hour, and there may or may not be evidence of any learning or meeting of the CAS requirements. So that's usually the way it works. 50 of those hours should be completed in 11th and 12th grade. So that requirement still exists, and like Mr. Schultz mentioned, we are trying to modify that just so that there's not so much stress on counting hours, but rather the process and the evidence and reflection and the learning of the experiences that the student chooses. That said, the CAS program is really an individualized program, and the first thing I ask the kids is, what is your passion? What are your interests? And let's build your CAS program around that. And that sums up CAS pretty much. There are some changes in service learning. I don't know if you want me to touch upon that now, or that will all be in the handbooks and all that. So if you have any questions, email me, and my door is always open for any questions. Thank you.
So a few words about that third component, that's part of the IB core, the extended essay. This is an independent research project that students will undertake, and like theory of knowledge, it starts the second semester of the junior year. Students will, in February, have an assembly where they're introduced to the guidelines and some exemplars of the kinds of projects that have been produced before, look at some grading criteria, and then start the research process. The librarian introduces them to all of our research databases, and they start thinking about what subject area they're very interested in and what teacher advisor they want to work with. The IB says that the student is supposed to put in approximately 40 hours of independent work developing this research paper. It's about 4,000 words. Curiously, the IB sets a maximum word limit of 4,000, but they don't have a minimum word limit. And so I guess if you could write a very elegant and thoughtful haiku, maybe you can get a good grade on it. Wouldn't recommend trying that, but it's, again, something that universities value very highly because it is the independent kind of research that students will do when they get to university, and it can also serve as a great portfolio piece when students are applying to university. They have, this economics or biology research, experiment that they ran, and can talk about that in depth when they're applying to a program in the university. That can really, make or break an interview. In general, IB recognition, and that you're going to have this presentation shared with you. This link and information is also in the handbook I'll give you, but the IB works very closely with universities around the globe and is recognized for, like I said before, admissions and also university credit. Any questions at this point that you might have about the direction you want to pursue for university placement for your child? You can start by looking on a database. The IB tries to keep updated this database of universities worldwide and how they recognize and award credit for the IB program. That said, they're always a little bit behind the current developments around the globe, and it's very important that you start looking to the specific university websites for up-to-date information. That's just a little footnote on how to begin that research, but it's not too early to start targeting a part of the world, whatever educational program, and then the specific university, so you know what the expectations are for application. Okay, now we're going to go into a series of just brief comments about the specific courses that students can choose from for their IB program. And this is something that, so you know, last week we presented to students. We had a series of 3 different morning sessions where all of the subject teachers went into some depth with students to talk about the course options and the differences between higher and standard level. So they should have a good foundation in what the course choices are, and you know, chances to talk with teachers more as we go through the selection process. But Group 1, which is IB English Literature, is what we offer at the school, and I've been teaching that for the 6 years I've been here. I won't be here next year. Mr. Scott Williams has been hired to take over as the IB coordinator and the IB English teacher. We're still offering the same course. The program is going to continue as it was, IB English Literature. Students have 2 choices in this subject area: higher level for 240 hours of contact, or standard level. All the same books are read at standard level as they're read at higher level. Higher level reads 2 additional texts, and some of the grading rubrics and expectations are higher, and the way points are awarded for that total of 1 through 7 points is more rigorous at higher level, so it's a more challenging program to achieve the higher scores. And as I mentioned before, in English, 30% of the work is graded by me internally and 70% externally by these other examiners worldwide. So that's the program in a nutshell. I could go into more details or share a syllabus if you want to see the exact texts that are read and exact writing assignments and oral assignments if you wish. But I think I'll leave it at that level of information for now and go on to Group 2, which is the second language. Could I ask all the language teachers to please come forward and explain a little bit about the course options?
Okay, so girls nominated me, but I think Monsieur.
Okay, I will start and you continue. Yeah. So in Group 2 we have French, we have Spanish, then we have Arabic in Group 2, and all the world language subjects have 5 topics, the same 5 topics that we treat in all classes. So for the 2 years, we're going to discuss those 5 topics, from identity to how we use our planets. So 5 topics for the 2 years. And like in all other subjects, we have high level and also have standard level. But in world languages, we also have ab initio. So if your child just starts French for 2 years, then the child can do ab initio. 3 years and higher will be standard level and higher level. Okay.
Let's see what else. They're assessed in their reading comprehension, their written communication, their oral communication, and a new component that just started this year. So your children will be taking the new exam is listening comprehension. So before it was embedded in the oral exam as an interactive conversation, and they have, while it's still part of the rubric of the oral, they have added an additional separate exercise or exam for listening or audio comprehension. So that's a new piece in the curriculum that will be in the exam starting this year. I guess the important thing as your child makes a choice of language is, you know, if they've been studying a language and have gone through level 1, 2, 3, and hopefully 4, then they should be prepared to go into SL, and some students will be prepared to go into HL. And the difference between SL and HL in all the languages is essentially the literature component. So HL studies 2 pieces of literature that is what is used for the oral exam. otherwise, they can do standard level. And then ab initio, well, it's supposed to be the beginner's course because of how fast the course goes and how many topics there are. We do recommend that the student have at least 1 or 2 years of kind of school language in order to be really successful. However, it is open for students. I think Arabic would like at least 1 year of study before entering ab initio, simply because they have to learn the script and all that. And it's essentially 18 months, reaching a high level of language in 18 months, and it's difficult for beginners. So just keep that in mind as you make your choice. That's it.
Before you all dash off, I want to introduce Miss Luisa Capucha. How do I pronounce your last name?
Capucha.
Capucha. Doctor.
Yeah.
You might have seen her teaching elementary school Spanish. She's moving now up to the high school. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am from Venezuela, and I've been here for 3 years with the small children, and I have enjoyed them very much. And now I have the opportunity to move on and do what I have done before. So I'm very happy to work with your children and do good reading and good talking and all that. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Luisa.
Before we moved on from the language options, I wanted to mention something else. It's always been an option here at school, always on offer, but seldom chosen. It's called SSST, School Supported Self-Taught Language. And this is an option that's available for a student who is fluent in academic skills and literary analysis in a language other than the Spanish, French, and Arabic that we have teachers to offer here. If a student is able to work in a language, we can make an arrangement, school supported, to have a student pursue an additional credential in their language class in this language, be it French, Hindi, Dutch, Yoruba, and the requirement would be that the school supports and explains the IB program, and that would come through the language teacher here. But then the actual study of the literature that's part of the program would come through a tutor that the family engages to work with the student to talk through the literature. And then the assessments and all the testing would be done here on campus. But that is an additional component that students can pursue if they're suited and they would be interested. It also leads to an additional credential. It leads to a bilingual diploma, which is an additional standard of recognition in a lot of universities if you're able to pursue your academics in more than one language. So that's an option. And the way it's arranged just specifically is that you would take English language A literature at higher or standard level, and then the second language at the language A literature standard level. So it has to be a literary fluency. You can write essays and literary analysis in this second language. Something to think about. If that's an option, I can talk to you about that a bit more. Okay, moving on, we'll go to the social sciences, as the IB says, Group 3.
Okay. Do you want to go? All right. Again, I am still Mr. Newborn, and I'm teaching IB history here. It is a 2-year course. We have HL and SL options. The difference, the standard level and higher level students both study a 20th century world history curriculum focusing on things like the Cold War, authoritarian states, the development of democracy. Higher level students will also study a regional component, Africa and the Middle East. Now that can go back as far as the 600s, reaching all the way up to, I think the latest thing they would look at is 2003. The internal assessment is a paper that the students are required to write. It's 2,200 words, but it is not really a 2,200 word history paper. Instead, it's about 1,500 words on history, and then about 700 words on how you do research and what were the problems associated with the research. The good thing about the history internal assessment is that it can be done in the first year, whereas most of the internal assessments are done in the senior year so that they kind of all get jammed together at one time. The history internal assessment can be gotten out of the way. So that's one of the good things about it. It is a course that requires a student who's willing to read. There is no single textbook. Instead, we have a number of texts that are used to introduce the student to a variety of different topics that they're going to have to be required to discuss. The tests that they take are essay tests. There's no multiple choice. It's not a gimme. The students are asked to demonstrate their critical thinking skills. They have to analyze, they have to evaluate, they have to demonstrate cause and effect relationships, and they have to incorporate historical facts and trivia that are just the requirements of history. It is not a course for somebody who isn't willing to read and isn't terribly interested in history. But if you are interested in history, it's a very interesting course. And I would encourage students who are interested to come and speak to me. And that's all I need to say about history. All right.
Hi, my name is Eric Freund, and I'll be teaching economics again. So we have HL and SL, 2 levels. The difference is that HL does a lot more math-related things. So unless you're a good math student, I would recommend SL. If you're good at math, HL has a lot of great stuff that you can use later on in life. The first year, we're going to do micro and macro. So microeconomics is about supply and demand, individual level, small industry. Macro is about national issues like GDP, inflation we're studying now, unemployment. The second year, we'll do international economics, which is about trade, protectionism, comparative advantage, exchange rates. And finally, we'll do developmental economics, which is like foreign direct investment, multinational corporations, WTO, IMF. So that's basically the course. Along the way, I think that it has an incredible breadth of real-world application, because the IA is 3 commentaries. Each commentary is 750 words. And what it is, it's reading an article. Just go online, find an article about something we're studying, and then comment on it. So you act like an economic advisor. And in the end, you'll make a recommendation. What should this corporation do? What should this country do? So it's really useful, I find, and it keeps you up to date on current events. So that's what the class is about. The IA will be 20% of your grade, and then you'll have 80% of your grade be the tests in May of 2021. There's 3 papers for HL, 2 for SL.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, English, additional language, social studies, and now we go to the experimental sciences, group 4. A lot of choice in this category.
Go first, okay. My name is Alfred Ohimane. I'll be teaching sports, exercise, and health science. This is a new course this year. Basically, we handle all of the sciences, physics, chemistry, and biology, but there's a sports twist to it. So if they have interest in sports itself, it's a great way to look at the sciences. So as I said, we study the physics, velocity, speed, force, impact, all of these concepts. We look at chemistry, respiration, how nutrition works and the different parts, carbohydrates, everything like that. And we look at biology, anatomy, physiology, digestive system, respiratory system, everything like that. So I know the last set, a couple of kids came over because they thought they would run away from physics, and they were shocked to find physics right there at them. But in the end, it's a very, very exciting course, and it's great to see how sports and science go together. So it is same thing as a 2-year program. It's only an SL program. They don't have the higher level option. The same like everybody else, we have like 7 chapters, major chapters in which to study, which go through, as I said, anatomy, physiology, nutrition, a bit of psychology, understanding coaching methods and things like that. And then they have some optional topics. They have 4 optional areas, and they can choose, they have to choose 2 of those areas in which to study also. They have an IA that they have to write, which is an experiment. They will look at something that excites them. It could be somebody studying something on penalty takers and how memory and penalty taking goes together. So there's so many options. Some people working on muscles, length of bones, and how high people jump. But it's a topic that they are truly excited in, and they choose that topic and they do their own research on that topic. In the end, we send it off to the IB organization. Their exam, they have 3 papers to write, a multiple choice section. They have another section which has short answers, and then a 3rd section which has more robust answers to certain questions. So it is a great science course, and as I said, if the children or the child has great interest in sports, it's a great way to put the knowledge of sports and science together. Thank you.
I'm Mrs. Anegne, and kids call me Mrs. A, which some of you know already. And like I told the kids a couple of days ago, IB Physics is pretty straightforward. We have 12 units, and there are 2 options that kids could take, the HL and the SL option. And like I mentioned, there are 12 units altogether. And both SL and HL do the 8 units, the first 8 units together. And then the remaining 4 are done by HL kids only. And all of us in sciences, we have common assessments, like you mentioned. We all have IAs. The IA is about 20% of the entire IB grade at the end of the program. And we all have the same assessments also, external assessments, which comprise of 3 papers, paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. But then the way the curriculum, the topics are structured are different as you go from one science to another. So like I mentioned already, mine is straightforward, 12, first 8, SL and HL, the last 4 done by the HL, and that's all. And one more thing that I need to point out, if your child is going to do IB Physics, the child must really be a lover of math. IB Physics is not a course that any child who doesn't like math come to, because we play a lot with math equations. You should be able to heavily apply the math skills that the child has in math classes to the IB problems. And if a child already is struggling in math, there's no way. And that's the reason why we have IB Math Studies as one of the math that has been offered to kids in the past. I'm not sure about next year whether we still have that. But because the level of math that is done in IB Math Studies is not rigorous enough or tough enough for kids who do IB Physics, I've always discouraged kids in the past, those who go for Math Studies, to never come to IB Physics, because I tried it earlier on and it was a lot of struggles and they couldn't do it. And after like the first 1-2 years, we stopped allowing those in Math Studies to do IB Physics. But if a child is in either Math SL or HL, that child is a good candidate for the IB Physics. And would definitely be successful. So that's about that.
Hello, I teach the IB chemistry, and we could kind of talk a little bit, I guess, about a continuum. Joffrey was talking about sports sciences and how it's a very broad field, and didn't really worry too much about math. Physics is probably the more mathematical of them. Chemistry sits kind of in the middle, and any of the students who are coming out of any grade 10 math class will be fine in chemistry. It's again an SL and HL class. There are 20% is IA. The students can pick anything they're interested in that they can quantify in chemistry and explore it. We dedicate about 10 hours of class content time where they come in and set up the labs. If you walked into my room now, you'd see 15 different experiments set up, still being finished up. There are 10 topics in chemistry. The difference is that all the students do the same 10 topics. The HL students just take them to a greater extent. So we basically talk about the core. And I spent some time with your students that are taking grade 10 with me the other day and kind of detailing that for them. So what happens is there's a nice cadre. There's a real support unit. All the students are doing the same thing at the basic level, and then the HL students continue on. On paper, it talks about differences in lab hours, but all of the students meet the upper end of the lab experience hours, because I think that lab experiences are really, really critical. One thing that we'll also talk about is a Group 4 project, which is kind of unique in that the students this year, the juniors, will get together from, this year there is physics, chemistry, and biology. And they will get together and they'll pick some question that they want to research. And the goal of that is for them to understand how each of the sciences supports the other one in the process of doing meaningful work. So that's another kind of thing that's unique about the sciences. But it's, again, a really nice program. They talk about chemistry as the central science because it can go toward engineering, it can go toward sports science, it can go toward biological sciences, or just be a good way to get to be an educated world citizen.
Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Wazinski, and I teach IB biology. IB biology here at the school is offered at the higher level only. It consists of 6 topics. The first topic is cellular biology, then molecular biology, which incorporates the vast amount of chemistry that we learn in biology. The third topic is genetics. Fourth topic is ecology. Then we study evolution and biodiversity, and we finish up the core with animal physiology. Then there is an option, and the option that we do is ecology and conservation. There are some other options that the students can choose to do on their own if they'd like to, but we don't have enough time in the year to teach those. We have enough time to teach the ecology option, and I try to encourage them to go in that direction. If they're really interested in one of the other areas, they can certainly do that. But the external assessment, which is paper 3, in the spring of their senior year, it's quite tough if they choose the option that we can study in the class. 80% of their IB score for biology is externally marked, 3 papers, same for the other 4 sciences. And then the internal assessment, or the lab, also known as the IA, is with 20%. Like the other 4 classes, the IA is research, it's a lab, there has to be a lot of individual motivation for that. It isn't a follow these directions type of lab, mix this with this and watch what happens. They actually have to do some real research, they have to be curious, and then write up a 7 to 12 page report. I guess if you have any other questions about IB bio, grab me afterwards. I guess one thing I should add, depending on the track that the students are going, but a number of students will take 2 Group 4 classes. If they can't take IB Bio and IB Physics, that doesn't work schedule-wise. So generally, if they're taking 2, they'll take IB Bio, maybe IB Chemistry, or possibly IB Chemistry and IB Physics. But you can't put the biology and the physics together. And I don't know how the sports house science fits in with that. I don't know how that's
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to mathematics. And the choices are a little, whoops, mathematics.
I'm Ms. Clifford, this is Mr. Durkin, and math has changed substantially in the IB for this coming year. As a result, Mr. Durkin and I created a presentation for your children, and it was shared with them already?
Yeah, it's been shared with them along with a survey, which about 75% of them have replied to on the 4 different maths courses that are now available.
There's a lot of information to digest in terms of these new courses, which is why we made the presentation. So please ask your children to see the presentation, or maybe we can provide it to Mr. Schultz and he can blast it out.
Add a link to it maybe on the newsletter.
Yeah, because there's really way too much to go into the depth of all the new courses. There are 2 new courses. Each course is offered at standard level and higher level. One course has more of an emphasis on applications, and one course is sort of a more like pure math type course. So there's one course called Applications and Interpretations, and the other one is Analysis and Approaches, or Approaches and Analysis. We've both looked at the syllabi of both of the courses pretty extensively. We've been researching possible textbooks. I've already had training on both new courses. The one course will allow students the use of calculators on all assessments, and one course will have a non-calculator and a calculator component to them. So the Analysis and Approaches course is sort of a more symbol manipulation, not always a context, looking for patterns, doing problems that might appear strictly within the domain of math. And the Applications and Interpretations course would be a lot more problems that have an application. There's a context to the problem. It's not looking purely for patterns within something with math and generalizing them. It might be, any kind of an application. So those are the choices that your children have. In both courses have 2 papers for tests, and an internal assessment, which is an exploration, which is an independent math. It's not a research paper, it's really where they seek the math in some context on their own and decide, to look into something and write about it. It could be anything from, is there a relationship between the release angle of a basketball during a free throw and the height of the player? And how would you figure out what you need to know and then go find out what you need to know in order to be able to do it? It could be, I did have a student do this one once, it could be, which is better if you're a doomsday prepper, pigs or chickens? Like, which will give you, more protein from, the input and the food, and I had a student model all kinds of things. I had another student who wanted to understand when he saw polls on TV that said this is with a margin of error of plus or minus 2%, and he wanted to know what that really meant, and how did they come up with those numbers, and how could he test whether they were accurate if he developed his own population and ran a bunch of simulations. There's just a ton of things that kids can do with those papers, but all students in all of the math courses will be producing one. That's our internal assessment. In higher level of both new courses, the third paper is an extended problem-solving paper where students will be solving problems that are unfamiliar. They will have, hopefully through the course, develop the skills to approach an unfamiliar scenario, but they might, in the analysis course, the scenarios will often be within the domain of math and will involve seeking patterns and generalizing them. In the applications course, they might be given a context, squirrels in a forest or in a nature preserve, and some sort of an equation that might model the population, and then be asked a lot of questions and then modify that model and conjecture and develop it further. So those are the two main differences between the courses, but I actually really encourage you to look and discuss with your child with the presentation. It was sort of fairly overwhelming to try to present all that to students as well.
Lots of your kids have already been coming up and talking to us. We think together that a really good indicator that a kid should take high level is that they've done the research and they've come and talked to us, because those are the type of kids that need to be taking high level. They've got the enthusiasm, they've got the preparation, they go down and put the work in and find that out, and really find out what's going on. High level needs enthusiasm, it really does. It needs the kids to be going, oh, I really want to do this, not I want to do this for engineering or something like that. As I say, a good amount of kids have finished the survey. It's just a complete, can we have an idea? There's nothing committed to that at all. We just want to see what the numbers are. We'll be talking to your kids all the way through before they pick anything. A good chunk of your kids have come up and talked about it already. I'm pretty confident we can really pick the right course for your kids, working together with them and you guys as parents. But as we say, there's 4 new courses instead of 3. High level is traditionally one of the lowest pass rates mathematics in the world, so they're trying to change it.
The lowest subscription rates.
Subscription rates.
Yeah, like in the world, like I mean, I don't know with the new courses, but in the current courses, in math, 9.4% of students worldwide take higher level math out of it. Whereas, say, in history, of the students who take history, the percentage who take higher level is up around 70-something%. So the new courses are partly intended to address that, but they're addressing it but at the same time putting substantially more emphasis on problem solving and on having the approaches to learning that allow you to encounter situations that are unfamiliar and use what you already know to arrive at new solutions. So the way I describe the ideal higher level student is the student who, when you give them something really hard, they kind of put a smile on their face, roll up their sleeves and go like that, and are prepared to sit there for 3 hours if that's what it takes. It doesn't matter how good somebody is at procedural math if doing the first description is very unappealing to them. They're going to be miserable in higher level. But they're going to love it if they like the kind of the challenging problems and those kind of really get their mental juices going. So I think that's probably it from now. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the last discipline subject area, our group 6, our arts teachers, visual arts and music.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ms. Catholic. I am the visual arts IB teacher. As you've been hearing, the SL and the HL, higher level, all of it is a lot of experimentation for the first year, a lot of research about artists, a lot of media exploration. So the first year for the arts will be just the medium. What are we going to be working with? They will choose a theme. The theme will be over the course of the 2 years. There's 3 parts. The first part is the comparative study. So they'll do a written analysis, comparative analysis of 2 different artists from different time periods, and really just break down the context in which that art was made, the function and the purpose and things of that nature. That's 20% of the grade. The other 2 portions are the process portfolio, which is 40%, and that is essentially going to be their journal, their sketchbook. So I would suggest that they get 2 because we really do work through this. it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of reflection about why you're making your choices. It's very different than my typical art classes like Art 1 and 2, where I have the project, I give it to you, and then you create. It's more of you telling me what you want to do, and then I kind of just help steer and guide you and help you with the research and pieces of that nature. The last portion is the exhibition, which is at the end of the 2-year course. They'll have a mini exhibition this year for the year 1s, but they won't be with the year 2 students. And that is another 40% of the score. And then on top of that, they have a curatorial rationale at the end. So HL will do a 700-word curatorial, and then the SL will do 400 words. The difference, again, with the comparative study, let me just go back, it's 10 to 15 pages, and it's an independent research study. So I kind of help them get their artists, but then from there, I'm only able to review it one time. So we work through that, and then I give them the fullness of it. And the process portfolio, it is 8 to 11 pages. I'm sorry, 9 to 18 pages for the process portfolio for SL. HL, they go from 13 to 25. So it's really a lot of independent work. So if your students are interested in just learning about art and different mediums, but also having a purpose and intention, then that's the course for them. Okay.
My name is Eric Taylor. I'm going to be teaching IB Music. We only offer IB Music at the standard level, and the nice thing about IB Music is it's just a year-long course. Meaning we start it in August when the school starts, and then they sit down and take their exams in May, and then they're done. So their senior year, then they can take an additional study hall. They kind of have some flexibility within their schedule, which I think is one of the nice things about offering IB Music. So IB Music, there is 3 parts to it. The first one is the performing part, performance, and the students have some options with this. They can either choose the solo performance track, which is then preparing for a recital, 15-minute recital. And that's great for any student who's maybe considering majoring in music, or someone who doesn't play a traditional band, instrument, or sing. So for instance, if your child plays violin, we don't offer orchestra here, string orchestra, but that's an opportunity for your student to take an IB music class and still continue with that education. Same thing with guitar players, a number of different instruments fit in that, as well as traditional instruments who want to pursue that route. The other option is group performance. If your student decides to take the group performance route, they would need to also sign up for symphonic band if they're an instrumentalist, or choir class if they're a singer. Okay, and the choir class is new this year. And so the group performance assessment is based off of them playing in the ensemble. Okay, so what they're working on in band class is their assessment. Okay, so that's the first part. The 2 other parts, there's a musical links investigation, which is a paper in which the students are comparing music from 2 completely different cultures, and they're looking at some finite elements of the music and they're comparing them. So again, this idea of world music, we want our IB students to be worldly minded. So it's great. It's very different than what you see in like a lot of American schools where it's AP music theory and we're only studying Western and classical music. And the last part is a listening paper, meaning that the students there'll be a recording of something playing, and the students have to answer questions based off of what they hear, and that's something that we practice throughout the school year, as well as they will receive a score, literally sheet music, and they have to answer questions based off of what they see in the score. So there's 3 parts. One of the things I had mentioned with the students, with just the group 6, the arts and music, tend to get kind of looked over, right? It's the arts. My child wants to be a scientist, a doctor. IB, and one of the learner profiles, is being balanced, right? We want our students to be creative. We want them to be good at math. We want them to do everything. And it's nice to have a balance and to have that art and to allow the students to be creative. If you look at doctors, engineers, medical professionals, people who we consider really successful now, they're all musicians, they're all artists. So please, you do not have to major in music to take IB Music or IB Art. It's just for students who are interested in learning more about music. And again, it's recommended that you have some sort of musical background, whether you're taking private lessons or you've been in band class or choir class in the past.
Okay, thank you. So those are the 6 subject areas. We have a wide range of classes and options available. Students are fairly familiar with all these choices. They've been given the diploma handbook, have access to teachers to further clarify what the options are. So these are discussions that should be held right now. Just going back to what was at the beginning of the presentation, the ways that students can make it through their junior and senior year here at AISL. Number one, they can go through without being an IB diploma student and just taking AIS courses in all of these subjects, get your US accredited AIS diploma. Number two, they can be a certificate candidate. I just wanted to make this clear because I'm not sure we said this at the beginning, but you can take just 1 up to 6 single subject area credentials in the IB without having to do CAS, the extended essay and theory of knowledge, to get university level educational credit. You can apply in university. Okay, so you can do that, or you can be a full diploma candidate, and any of those 3 options gives you an AIS diploma as well. Then if you do the full diploma, the IB diploma. So those are the choices. They take a lot of, I think, thought and commitment at this point once you come in and make your course choices, and perseverance. You go into the program knowing that there are going to be some long study sessions, some draining times when you're like, oh, I finished all my work for English, but now I've got the chemistry work facing me. Oh wow, chemistry's great, but now, oh wait a minute, economics project. And they just keep coming, and then on top of all this, oh, after school and on Saturday I need to go to Keshup school to do my volunteer work and do some CAS work and the sports things that people want to be involved in. And oh, I want to be a Model United Nations and go on the trip and go to those extracurricular activities. It just keeps adding up, and it's a lot to take on. And so that idea that a student is organized and highly motivated and just really has the commitment, that's a core that you have to be sure is there. Otherwise, it's going to be dragging students through the program and a real challenge. And it's not just a challenge for the student. Families and support networks are going to have to be there and called in to get a student through the program. So you as family, you're providing a lot of support. So that's something that's a commitment on your part as well as the students, and I want you to be thoughtful of that. But it does open doors. It is very satisfying. Students can be very proud, and I hear from students who've gone off to university, they feel so prepared. They feel like they can be successful. And all of the students who are coming from other kind of educational experiences are saying, wow, how do you balance your time? Where did you get those writing skills? How do you get through all of this and know what classes to prioritize? It really, this program really does help students gain those kind of skills for success. So I think it is a wonderful option, and we're happy to talk with you further about it. I think this brings us to the end of the presentation. I'd like to hand out diploma handbooks, so now you can hear me finally. So let's start over. Just kidding. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Let me give some of these to people in the back. And teachers and officials and counselor and I will be here if you've got questions.